everyone. So I started this demo in class and I figured I would finish it on here. So to start this pastel drawing, I used alcohol, rubbing alcohol 70%. When it's a higher percentage, it helps to liquefy the pastels a little bit better. And I'm using UArt paper 400 grain. And I started this drawing with mostly hard pastels, my new pastels by Prismacolor, these guys. And so I'll continue to work with both my hard and my softer pastels. But so after I did my wash, and I actually used complementary colors. So I put orange underneath the blue, and I put purple underneath the more yellow seaside cliffs. And yeah, I just kind of worked with the values to create light and shadow. And so you can still sort of see where the brush strokes are. And then I started to layer the dry pastels on top. So I'm going to continue on with the drawing. Also, I applied the pastel, like the first couple layers, with just using the side of my pastel lightly over the sand grain paper. Then I used a larger brush, dipped it in my alcohol, and rubbed it over the top. Let it dry, and then came back in with my pastels. So let's see here. And I really like to use complementary colors. I feel like you can usually sort of pick up hints of that complement underneath the page. And I just feel like it kind of helps unify everything, move your eye around the page a bit more, etc. So I'm going to be layering in a multitude of colors to try to get the color that I see here, because a lot of times my pastels aren't going to have the correct color right off the bat. So I'll have to layer them and combine them in order to blend and create my own colors. So I still might be a bit more impressionistic with this, but it'll start looking a little more like this photo here. Funny enough, I actually just went to Torrey Pines yesterday and got to see more of these gorgeous sea cliffs. So this is like a yellow ochre color, and I'm just starting to layer some of this over the side of my sea cliffs. And being that I'm working on a flat surface and I already have some pastel layered up, I'm gonna get that pastel dust pretty quickly. So I will have to periodically take my pastel and dump some of that excess powder. Or you could always work on an easel, and then that excess pastel powder will drop to the bottom, which is nice. You can have a pastel tray down there to catch that extra powder. But being that we are making a demo right now, the easel isn't the best choice. So you can see I'm just kind of grabbing different colors, a little bit of oranges, a little bit of yellow. I want these two colors to be pretty close to the same. This might be just slightly darker in value since it's the reflection, but it looks pretty close to me. And I'm really switching up the direction in which I move my pastel as well. Just adding a little bit of that yellow all over. I'm not pressing very hard, I'm pressing very lightly so that I can add a multitude of layers. If I pressed really hard right off the bat, then I would not be able to add as much pastel, as many layers and colors later on. And as you can see, this reflection is not quite as clear. There's a lot of little tiny horizontal lines through it, etc. So I want to be sure to capture that too, so it really looks like more of a reflection. And even though these sea cliffs go all the way out around, the reflection seems to stop maybe even about here. I think I went out a little too far with it. Let's see. And just looking at the various shades of blue, it's much more desaturated than than the blue that I have. That's also another reason why I added that orange layer underneath, is because complementary colors can help desaturate whatever color you're trying to create. So if I have a blue and my blue is too bright, I'm going to add a little bit of orange, which is opposite the color wheel, to tone it down just a little bit. So I will say though, since I use the alcohol, I'm not able to blend in my blue with that orange. The orange sort of creates, that alcohol creates a new, like a fresh ground. So I'm just adding a little bit more powdery dry layer so that it can better blend in with that blue. So I'm just adding a little bit here and there, and then I'll add more blue on top. The blue that I see is also a little bit lighter than the one I'm using, but I just don't have the perfect shade of blue. So I have to blend several shades of it. And right now you can see a lot of the paper through, or those first layers. That's just because the pastel is catching on certain areas of the paper, but as I layer more and more colors, that paper will show through less and less. Using a light blue, where that water really reflects that sky color, but it's definitely not as bright as the sky. Adding a little bit of blue and horizontal stripes across the reflection on my seed clips. You can kind of see that through here, just to make it look a little bit more like a reflection. And there is a little bit more to this drawing, or sorry, to this photograph. But in order to get all of this in the screen, I taped over it. I'm gonna have to dump some of this pastel dust soon. It builds up so quickly. Actually, let me get. So when I'm looking at this edge, I don't want it to just to be straight line where there's no nuance to it. So I'm really trying to pay attention to the angle. So this is a little bit flatter, and it has a little bit of a more steep angle, but it's a little bit of like a bump here. And it comes out and then back. So just to make it look a little bit more like something we would find in nature rather than just a straight diagonal line. This area looks a little bit cooler, so I'm gonna add some blue in there. Maybe even some purple. I feel like that blue is too light. Just a touch of purple. Let's see. layer a little more before I untape and dump that excess pastel. See, so the sky toward the top of the page is going to be a little bit darker, and then toward the horizon line it gets a little bit lighter. Just trying to capture that here. Okay. What else can I do? Maybe a little bit more green up in here. So I'm using a really dark green for this. If you don't have a really dark green, you could always layer maybe black and the greens that you do have. You also want to pay attention to how warm or cool the green is. Some greens just look a little bit more natural. All right. I'm going to want to start adding some of these darks within the mountainside as well. Nature's just so beautiful, isn't it? Look at that. Okay, now maybe I'll add a little bit of a lighter, more natural green. This is more of an olive green on the top. So I'm leaving this deep green underneath showing through for some of those shadows, and then just layering it. Top of that. Oh, I have a little ant friend joining us. I think this could have been moved a tiny bit that way. Let's see, maybe we'll do that. That's the beauty of pastels, is I can just layer right over it. As long as I haven't added too many layers, because depending on the type of paper, the type of pastels, how hard you press, that will determine how many layers you can add. But usually you can get quite a few. Using like a burnt sienna toward the top here now. A little bit more of that greenery down below. Okay. If I squint my eyes, is the amount of greenery to sea cliff correct? What about the amount of light and dark? I feel like I have a little bit too much of that greenery showing here, so I'm gonna come in and add a little bit of that lighter value. Just so that maybe layer in some of that like golden yellow ochre type color with more of a light pink. to lighten it up a tiny bit and cool it down a little bit. Even though pink is still more of a warm color, it's not quite as warm as that yellow. It's all relative. And I want to leave some of the paper showing through, a little bit of that background showing through, just to create a little bit more depth. Let's see. And I'm moving the direction of the stroke of my pastel too. Okay, and then I've got to add a little bit of that, my reflection as well. Maybe even a little more of this color. Oh, I love that color. It's so pretty. Okay, gonna untape this here. We don't want to blow it. That is not good for our health, and it gets everywhere. Okay. All right, I've got my little paper plate here. Let's see what this is doing down here. It's a little bit darker, and then we've got to add in all those waves still. Make sure everything's still within the frame. Okay. Maybe just a little more light pink. I like that color. And I will say, so I'm using the U art paper, and that does allow me to add quite a few layers. So even more than your average pastel paper. So if you're following along and you can't add quite as many layers, that's probably why. Okay, this is like a light cream. Oh, actually, let's try one of these. This is my soft pastel set. Is that different enough? I want something that will actually make a difference here. So, yeah, I think I like that better. It's just a little brighter. So I'm really looking for where the highlights on this seaside cliff are, and I'm squinting just to see where that value is a little lighter. And just squinting just helps break it up into bigger shapes, light and dark, different colors, etc. Ooh, I like how bright that is. Okay. That needs a little bit more yellow gold, maybe orange. All of the above. So even though I'm holding my pastel like this, I'm not, like for some parts, I'm pushing the whole thing across the page, like using all of this For other areas where I just want to add a little bit, I'm just using maybe this portion. So I'm angling my pastel a bit to do that. Let's see, as I'm doing these waves in the background, let's see, there's also a little bit of land back here. Okay, so maybe I'll start with something not quite as bright. So this is my light pink still. And I'll add a little bit of white over it. And I see a little bit of shadow underneath those waves, so maybe a bit of purple. Let's see, maybe just a touch of blue over the top of that. And then that pink again. And I think I need to get a little bit more muted with this area so that you can see the waves on top of it. It just seems a little bit a little too busy. So I'm adding more of a neutral brown right in this area. Adding a little bit to my sand back here too. There's clumps of seaweed in the reflection. Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna add a bit more of this wave, and I'm just making, I don't want to make big swooping motions that come immediately toward us. I'm making little tiny horizontal lines, and if they do have a little bit of a swoop like this, you can see how it is making a big arc down the page. But all of these are really foreshortened, so they're going to be really very much a horizontal shape. And I know mine's not going to be exactly like it is, let's see, in the photograph, because my dimensions are a little bit different. Mine is a little bit longer and shorter. Let's see if I can kind of see behind you. Okay. So maybe a touch of purple. You could do a little bit of brown or blue underneath some of these just to give them a little bit of depth. That shadow makes them look a bit more three-dimensional. Okay, and let's see, I even got some lines. This, maybe a little bit more brown in some of my water. Since it's so shallow, you can see through to that wet sand. And as it goes a little further back, you can see a bit more of that sky color shining through. So I'm gonna add a little bit more of that light blue back in. I say shining through, sky color reflecting. It's probably a better term. And just gonna blend a tiny bit with my fingers. I don't do it often, but once in a while. In areas like the clouds, things like that, you have really soft edges. I usually don't leave the blended area on top though. I'll always add just a little bit of pastel on top to give it a little bit more depth and texture. Okay, now I'm gonna come in with some of my white. And in areas where I want my white to be a little brighter, I'm gonna press harder. Let's see. And when I'm looking at the edge of this water, it's not all connected. Some of those little areas are almost like dashed lines, but I'm going to press a little harder toward the front of that whitewash where it's a little bit brighter white. And then maybe back here, as you see some of these little white dashed lines, I'm not going to press as hard. And I'm actually using this side again, just so it's not, I don't want it to look really disjointed, like I just randomly dotted it. I want it to look a little bit more just subtle, like it's part of the wave. Okay, just maybe a tiny bit. It gets much darker as we get toward us, and then this area is picking up more reflection. Okay. I'm gonna get rid of some more of this dust. All right, let's see. This color needs to be a little bit more resolved. And that sky needs a little help still. Okay. Okay, white. Let's see, actually, first I'm just gonna blend this a tiny bit. So it's a little softer in some of these areas, just where I want to cover a little bit of that orange background that's peeking through. And as you can see, I did tape off the edges of my canvas so that I have a little bit of a border when I'm done. Okay. Now, going to use my white, even though it looks a little dirty. Just softly add some of these clouds back in. So I'm not pressing very hard. I'm pressing a little softer around the edges, And then in the center where I want it to be a little brighter, I'll press a little harder. As you can see, I'm holding the pastel sideways so that the side of it is pressing against the paper. That way I just cover more area at once. It's not quite as hard of a line. It's a little bit of a softer blend. And when I'm doing smaller areas, I like smaller pieces. That's why I broke my pastel to be a little shorter. And clouds that are more like this, a little more subtle, I'm just not pressing very hard. You can touch along the edges. I wouldn't blend in the whole thing, just then it looks a little too smeared sometimes. And in areas where I want it a little brighter, I'll just press a tiny bit harder in the center. I don't want to press really hard along the edges unless the cloud has a really hard edge, but these are pretty soft. Okay. And I think we're getting kind of close here. Let me a little light pink again. A little bit more of this burnt sienna color. See it building up here. I'm not gonna add that. I just want it to be a more natural scene. So you can always take artistic license and add or omit things as you see fit. So just maybe a little more yellow in here. Ah! Whoops. So just trying to get a little bit more of the sandy color up toward the top. You can see all the various colors that I'm using, but I want it to blend with the rest, so I think it still needs to be a touch brighter. Maybe I'll press a little harder with my light pink. Adding a little bit of that yellow back in. And this has a little bit of an impressionistic feel, and I personally like that style. That's why you can still see so many colors popping through. And yeah, just not blending a ton. I like to leave some of those marks. What else was I gonna do? Maybe add a little bit more of this greenery in here. Warm that shadow up just a little bit. So I had the dark green in there, and this is like a dark brown, brickish red color. Complements. I think I need to add a little bit more of this green shadow color in here. It's a bit more reflective. And maybe I'll blend a tiny bit since it's the reflection. And then maybe a little bit of that seaweed or rocks, whatever's washed up on the shore over here. I'm using my really dark green and just making a lot of horizontal movements with my pastel, but I'm not making them all the same. I'm really looking for the clumps, which areas connect, and even if it's not exactly like the photo, I just I don't want it to be just random everywhere. I'm kind of looking at how these patterns lay down. Okay, and then maybe adding a little bit of that dark brick red brown color over the top so it's not super green, maybe leaving a little bit of that green showing through. Okay, and then a little bit of that light around it again. Another thing, I think I'm pretty happy with this area. I just feel like I could do a little bit more in this water area. Adding a little bit more burnt sienna underneath some of that water to tone it down just a little bit. And all of my mark making in the water is going to be more horizontal to make it look like it's laying down. I could probably even use a little bit more purple in here. Let's see what it's doing. Okay. Okay. Anything else that I see? Maybe just a little bit more of a reflection right over here. That's the beautiful thing with pastels, is you don't have to worry about the paint drying or anything like that. You can just always come back to it, unless you use a final varnish on top of it. You can always come back and add more if you see anything else. I always like to take a step back before I really say something's done, just in case I decide I missed something, or just to view it from a fresh perspective later on. A little bit more of that light pink in here, and maybe just a touch of that orange. All right, there you have it. Still a little bit impressionistic, but that's okay. I think it's kind of a fun rendering of the Torrey Pines photo, and yeah, I feel like it's kind of fun to combine realistic and impressionistic styles. I always love adding so much color with pastels because they're just so vibrant. And let's see, so lastly, I'm going to bump this pastel one more time. Okay, unpeel the tape on my border. Looks like a little pastel seeped past those edges, but that's okay. If I were to spray this, I would do it before I took the tape off. But just for the sake of this demo, we'll see what it looks like completed. And I'm careful not to put my pastel-ridden fingers along the edges. I'm just holding it with my nail. All right, there you have it. Torrey Pines.